Next up on the number one tee.
Well, hello, and welcome back to your virtual tea time. My name is Tori, and today we have Mike Booker joining us, author of the Tournament Golfer's Playbook. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey, Tori. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good. So today we're going to go over the golfer who plays tournaments and the tournament golfer and kind of differences between the two. I know this will resonate with a lot of listeners, but Mike, I feel like I got to tell you where I'm at right now so that you know who you're talking to. All right. You ready?
All right, I'm ready. I think.
I have the State Am coming up, the Arizona State Am, and I have not practiced. I am not prepared at all for it. I just haven't been in the mood. It's all kind of gone past me. So I've been toying with the idea of actually withdrawing, okay, to be completely honest. And then the past couple of days, I've been reading your book, and it's just been slowly chipping away at me. Like, what are you doing? You have to just keep going. Like, you have to, like, every chapter I read, I was like, oh shit. Now I really have to stay. Now I really have to stay. I just, someone said it on my show the other day. I think it was Christine Fraser. She goes, I'm a recovering tournament player. And there's something about playing tournaments where is the word diabolical? Maybe not, but there's just like, there's one end of the spectrum that is, it helps your game so much, and there's nothing that can replace it or nothing that can give you the skills that you learn when you're in the middle of a tournament round. But then on the other end of the spectrum, it sometimes can just tear you down to its core, to your core. Some of that scar tissue, and we're going to get into some scar tissue later in the show, but it's tough sometimes. It's tough to just stick with it.
It is. And people don't really understand. People who don't play tournaments will never quite understand the difference between tournament golf and recreational golf. So that perplexes people who don't really understand the differences. For example, they have a great player at their club, a junior player who's shooting in the 60s all the time. Then they go off on a golf scholarship and they can't make the team. They don't understand, and it's understandable why they don't understand. They don't understand what is wrong because the kid comes back, a boy or girl comes back and right where they left off, shooting 68, 66 every time they tee it up. And it just doesn't compute with people that haven't really competed themselves to understand that it's completely different type of situation. For one thing, it's very lonely. Tournament golf is dramatically more lonely than recreational golf. Mm-hmm. Recreational golf, somebody might give you that 3-footer, no big deal. Somebody, even if you have a little money game going, everybody's kind of, generally speaking, pretty light. But in a tournament, as you well know, it's completely different. You have to, you got to post a score, and your butt's kind of hanging out there for everybody to see. Mm-hmm. And when you do well, of course, it's exhilarating. And when you don't do well, it's really difficult, sometimes difficult to rebound from. Spoke to the Texas, the state junior here in Texas started yesterday, and I spoke at their dinner. They gave every 240 of the kids, they gave them my book as a tea prize. So I told them I'd come talk to the dinner. And what I really told them, one of the things I told them was, if you're a tournament golfer versus a golfer who just plays tournaments, tournament golfer, there's going to be times, most times, when things don't go right, things don't go well. And so to behave like a tournament golfer, continue to be your own best friend, continue to understand what you can control and what you can't control. And even if you go out and shoot just a terrible round, you want to be able to look back and say, well, I didn't throw any clubs. I was my own best friend. I was all these things that make up what I call a tournament golfer. I think that's much easier to recover from, knowing that you tried your best, you didn't give up, and you didn't have terrible self-talk, et cetera, all these things we can talk about a little bit more. And you can recover from that much more than you can recover from really bad self-talk. It's kind of like spraying graffiti on the inside of somebody's mind. And they, lost it and called themselves names and threw clubs or whatever it is that they did. That's much more difficult to recover from. I'd much rather hold my head up high and just, fail miserably than to realize I'm failing miserably and just give up and be ashamed later on that I did that. Tournament golf is just so much lonelier. In basketball, nobody's there to set a pick for you to make an easy layup, and in football, if you're the quarterback, you throw this kind of wobbly pass, but your receiver makes a great catch. Everybody forgets it was maybe not the greatest pass in the world, but golf just doesn't have that. And that's why, besides the actual game itself being so difficult, when it comes to tournament golf, it's all you. And there's nobody there to really help you through that other than yourself. So that's why I talk a lot about chapter 12. I talk a lot about being your own best friend, because if you're not your own best friend, when it comes to tournament golf, you are toast.
And so on the flip side, let's go on, why is playing tournaments so important to improving your game? And let's talk to all levels. So yes, there's this high level amateur golf where you're playing state championships, you're trying to qualify for national championships. But there's also a club level too, where you're playing, your club championship or President's Cup or whatever is big for you as a golfer. Why is entering these tournaments, putting yourself out there, why is it essential?
Everybody's trying to get better. And so there's nothing like tournament golf to point out what part of your game needs the most work. It's not uncommon to see, somebody who hits a really long ball. Every time you look at them on the driving range, they're hitting drivers because that's what they enjoy, but they really ought to be over on the putting green or maybe over at the short game area. So I would say number one thing about playing tournament golf is it's going to show you what part of your game under the gun, under pressure. That's when you find out exactly what kind of shape a particular part of your game is in. You're going to find out right away what you need to work on. So that's number one. And then number two, I've known people over the years that have just practiced really hard. Ben Hogan said you find it out in the dirt, and Ben Hogan was right. But if all you do is practice, and don't put yourself in a position that's uncomfortable like a tournament golf, then you're not really going to really be a great tournament golfer, not really going to improve your game as much, even though smacking out balls for hours and hours feels like you're really improving the game. Doesn't really mean a whole lot if you're not out there failing enough to understand, why did I fail in this tournament and what can I do differently next time?
And in golf, you lose a lot more than you win by a lot. So how as a player should we be able to really accept that and have proper expectations while still going into these events, being a tournament player, being tough, being well-disciplined and not dwelling on the negative, like knowing that, this sport is hard? I
think one of my chapters I called Embracing the Suck.
Yeah.
And
to that chapter.
It's interesting. We just, today is Tuesday, and Sunday I was for last Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just a couple of days ago, I played in the West Texas Amateur, and I lost in a playoff. I lost in the first hole of the playoff, had about a 3.5-foot putt. I played it right center and it broke right and I missed, and it's all over. I'm second place. A good friend of mine who's now no longer with us, Robert Boer, used to always give himself a 2-day mourning period. So I'm in my second day of mourning, and so I'm just like, why didn't I play that putt differently? Why didn't I do this differently? There's always all this second guessing, but the reality is that it's over, and you've got it. And I've been in a poopy mood here the last couple of days, just and wondering, what if I'd done this differently? What if I'd done that differently? And so for 55 years, I've been playing tournament golf. You still have that same sting. It still stings as much as it ever did when you don't perform like you wanted to. Mm. And so you just have to deal with that. And believe me, Tori, it's taught me so much in my non-golfing life. As I make a big point in the book, I talk about life hacks that, embracing the suck as a tournament golfer, not necessarily a golfer, but to some extent, yes, a recreational golfer, but a tournament golfer accepts going in that most of the time it's not going to be, what you wanted it to be. Yeah. And it may be, worse. If I missed the cut in the West Texas Am, I'd feel a lot worse than if I lost in a playoff, but it still stings both ways. And so you accept that going in, you embrace that suck. And I was, when I was speaking to these junior golfers at the state junior, I told them, I said, embracing a suck is not just accepting that bad things are going to happen to you. It's embracing that they're going to be happening and they become part of what you deal with, so that you're not a victim of a bad break or, bad luck. That you take responsibility for every shot you hit. You hit it right down the middle and goes in a divot. You can choose to say, oh, it's a terrible break. What, this is awful. Or you can choose to say, hey, I hit it here. Now, how are we going to deal with it? So golf really, really, really teaches you that. But it's the school of hard knocks. I mean, there's no getting around it. So I would tell anybody who wants to who wants to really go and become a tournament golfer, not just a golfer who plays tournaments, that they're going to get knocked around. You got to learn how to pick yourself up and do it all again and do it and try and do it better next time.
And in that chapter, Embrace the Suck, which was one of my favorites, the quote at the beginning of the chapter is, sometimes we are tested not to show our weaknesses, but to discover our strengths. And I love that quote. So since you are still in your mourning period of your tournament, I'm not sure if you've done your post-tournament analysis yet, but is there one thing in particular that you learned, even after 55 years of playing, that just this past tournament you learned moving forward? It's
a great question. And I'll tell you, I woke up about 4 this morning and I was thinking about my decision making. So the first hole that we started on 17, par 5. And in the tournament, all 3 days, I carried the water, I'd hit driver. I noticed most of the field was laying up short of the hazard, lay up again and have a wedge in. But I had, in the practice round, I hit a couple of balls, and both of them carried the water, no problem. In the first round, I carried the water, hit the green in 2. Second round, it was a little bit of a breeze. I was a little bit worried. So I laid up and I ended up making a bogey. And then in the final round, I drove over the water, knocked it on the green. So I felt like that was my game plan. So here we go in the playoff, and there was no wind. And my opponent hits it in the hazard. He had hit first. He hit it in the hazard. So now I have to decide, am I going to lay up and try and, I wasn't really comfortable with laying up. I didn't like the layup shot. Sometimes, that happens. And so I was on the tee box and I probably waited a minute and I had a driver in my hand and I thought, well, he's hit it in the hazard. Maybe I should just lay up. But what I decided to do was to go ahead and play the hole like I'd been playing it. Why change my game plan just because of what someone else had done? And it kind of goes to that idea of understanding what you can control and what you cannot control. So if he had hit it over the hazard, which he didn't, he hit it in the hazard, it would have been one thing to just suddenly change my game plan and play it differently based on what he had done. Or do I continue to go ahead and play this hole, which I had been playing successfully, go ahead and play this hole like my game plan was. So I elected to hit driver and play this hole like I'd been playing it all week, rather than suddenly change my game plan. I'm laughing because I hit a really good drive, but when we got out there, it had not carried. Now that's where all the second guessing's been going on for the last, couple of days. So that was Sunday. Sunday night, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should have just laid up. No, but I made peace with it now that I didn't change my game plan. I think that was the right thing to do. I actually did. I executed a really good strike. Should have carried. I don't know really what happened. It was getting late in the day. I don't really know. But so what I learned from that is that it's very painful, and I second guess myself a lot. But ultimately, I've made peace with the fact that I maintained my game plan, how I'd been playing that hole every other time I played it.
And actually, that reminds me of one of the points you make in the book is, hold on, let me find the correct wording here. Well, it had something to do with the tournament golfer will play so much better on a course that they don't like.
I talked about what an advantage it was for a tournament golfer to play, for example, in bad conditions, because everybody's complaining about the conditions.
Yeah.
Or which might be weather, or it might be the actual golf course, is just a goat ranch and everybody bitches and moans about it. It's a huge advantage for the tournament golfer because I've never cared. It's nice if we get to play Pebble Beach as I did in the USAM in 1999, but I'm there to compete. So I really don't care if we're playing down an interstate highway. Yeah. I just want to compete. So the attitude that I think that's what you're talking about, Tori. The attitude is that, hey, if everybody's complaining about how bad the greens are, everybody's complaining about the coldness of the weather, whatever it may be, I like that because I'm not going to let that soak in. I'm just going to play. And it gives me a little bit of an advantage.
So that reminds me of, again, my upcoming tournament, the State Am. Again, it's next week, 3-day stroke play. It's at Desert Highlands. Have you ever played there by chance?
Yes.
Oh, you have? Oh my God.
Yeah.
So
it's a challenging course.
It's a very challenging course. The desert is very penal. Like you get into the desert and most likely you're in a bush. For the tees that we're playing as women, there's not a lot of driver holes. So there's a lot of layups, a lot of strategy involved. I'll definitely have my GPS out before going into the tournament, seeing where, my targets are and everything. I have found myself having the attitude of, this is not the golf course for my game. This is not, why should I even bother? Like, that's one of my excuses of maybe I shouldn't be playing, on top of not being prepared because, and what world do I play well at Desert Highlands? It just doesn't, I can't see it at all. This is another reason why I'm stuck a little bit. So get me back in the right frame of mind. Mike, come on.
I've won, and maybe yourself as well. I've won a lot of tournaments on courses that I didn't particularly care for. I've qualified for USGA events on courses that I really didn't particularly care for. And so my first message would be, hey, it's doable. It's absolutely doable. You may not love the golf course. And likewise, I've played some of my really favorite golf courses that I feel like I just screwed up on. I just kind of blew it. I love this golf course, but I didn't get the job done. So I think first thing is you absolutely can do well in a course you don't care for. I think the first thing you got to do, Tori, is figure out what it is you really don't care about. What do you really don't like? Maybe it's too penal. Maybe, you don't like the way that the hole necessarily fits your eye, that sort of thing. So figure out my suggestion would be to you and anybody else, if they're going to play a course that they really don't feel like they can do well on, then figure out a way how you can do well on it. So it may involve playing more position golf, more of a connect the dots sort of approach than overpowering. Oftentimes, people don't like a course because the pin placements can be challenging or the greens can be challenging. So make a pact with yourself to not go at sucker pins, to play to the middle of the green. And take your medicine. I think that a lot of times, particularly Desert Highlands, but there's a lot of golf courses that, and set up for a state championship, that they're going to have half a dozen sucker pins, and make a pact with yourself. You're not going to go for the sucker pins, and you might surprise yourself. You might just come out and play really well.
Yeah, I can feel myself in a growing situation right now, like a growing pains. It's lasted now about 18 months. I'm definitely still in it, but I'm definitely progressing to the next level of my golf game. And it's because I'm putting myself in more bigger championships and putting myself in there. And it's extremely uncomfortable. And
yep.
I just, you just commit to the process.
Nicholas said the day that he is not nervous and uncomfortable on the first tee be the day he quit playing tournaments. So he's the greatest player ever. And that's how he felt. And so, embrace it. It's you're nervous and you maybe sick to your stomach, all these things that we experience as tournament golfers, but that's part of it. That's what we sign up for. And we sign up for that abuse, that suck. And so suck it up and go do your best, get a game plan together. Don't let the golf course get in your head. And in those areas that the golf course has gotten into your head, figure out a way around them.
I like it. I'm on my path to a better mindset with that. So.
I can see it.
Okay, so let's get down to the real. There's actually a chapter in the book that is the golfer who plays tournaments and the tournament golfer. So I want to get into just what's going on in that chapter, but also really the entire book has kind of points throughout that we can touch on. So in that chapter, though, you list the excuses for a poor score. And you also say, don't complain, don't explain. And I love this because, you go ahead and explain what the tournament golfer does with when someone asks what they shot that day.
So that example, I always marveled. And most of the book is not really, I didn't want it to be about me so much. It's more about things I observed. There's this, when I played Scott Simpson in the semifinals as a junior, what he did that I didn't do, and I didn't know what the heck he was doing and wish I did. I couldn't figure out for the longest time. I'm talking about 20 years. I couldn't figure out what the real difference is between the guys that were beating me. I mean, I felt like I drove it as well. I felt like I putted as well. I felt like I did everything at least as well as they did. But there's a group of guys that kind of consistently beat me. And I really and truly couldn't really figure out exactly what was going on. It was very frustrating. And I'd win tournaments and stuff. But then, as I said in the book, sometimes I wouldn't really know how it was that I won. I just played and it kind of worked out, and that's no way to really approach tournament golf. So originally came up with the concept of a tournament golfer versus a golfer who plays tournaments. About 5 or 6 years ago, Coach Jonathan Dismuke at University of Houston had this really talented group of guys, but they were not doing well. They weren't winning tournaments, and he couldn't understand it because they were really talented. And so he called me up and said, hey, would you come talk to these guys? And I said, sure. I mean, I was flattered to do that and honored. So I thought, gosh, let me put together an outline of what I think is important. And so I wrote down everything that's in the book, or a lot of the beginning parts of that, being your own best friend and understanding what you can control, what you can't control, staying in the present versus, results oriented thinking, which certainly wasn't my original idea, but that was something I'd always worked on, talked about breathing, all these things. So I just kind of put a short outline together. But when I really started thinking about it, I the first thing I said when I sat down in front of, there were about 15 or 18 young men, I said, you guys probably all think that you're tournament golfers, but I think you're probably just golfers who play tournaments. And they kind of looked at each other, didn't really know what the heck that meant. It was a sort of a tough love sort of thing where I was saying, you're playing at being a tournament golfer, but you're not doing what you need to do to be a tournament golfer. And so we went into all these different things that I ended up ultimately, I was never a bucket list item or on my radar to write a book. I'd never thought about writing a book. But once I started doing this outline, and about 3 weeks later, these guys won a big tournament. And I thought, wow, maybe I've got something here. I don't know. And I originally thought I'd put like some thoughts together, outline a pamphlet, maybe give it to my friends. But it got bigger and bigger. And so then I did a little research, and I saw that there were 60,000 golf books. And I thought, oh my God, does the world really need another golf book? And I dug a little deeper, and about half of them were written on the mental part of the game, which was my interest. So I thought, well, they're all written by sports psychologists. And I think sports psychologists are great, but how many of them have stood over a 5-foot putt to qualify for the USAM? Or how many of them had stood on the 18th hole, the last round of the tour school, needing a par to get their card? I'm sure maybe some of them have, I don't know, but I felt like, well, maybe it's time for somebody who's actually played a lot of tournaments and suffered greatly and had some success, but mostly a lot of suffering. And how can maybe that help people, about that. So that's when I made the commitment to write the book. And then I put the life hacks in there simply because everything I've been able to do in business has been because of what I learned in tournament golf about myself and about others. And so the primary difference is that, tournament golfer, when they triple bogey the last hole to shoot 72, as hard as it is, I believe the true tournament golfer, when you ask them what they shot, they say 72 and they keep walking. The golfer who plays tournaments, they want to walk you through every shot they hit. Oh my God, I hit this great shot on 18. I made a triple bogey. Otherwise I'd have shot 69. But the reality is, and you and I both know this, nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. And my senior year at the University of Houston, we won the national title. We won the national championship, and I was an All-American. We had 4 All-Americans on the team, wonderfully talented team. But Coach Williams, Coach Dave Williams, while on the golf course back in the day, I'd come up to you and want to know how you're doing. So he'd kind of figure out how the tournament was going. And his famous line was, because he'd come up to me and I'd say, oh, Coach, I lipped out here and I hit this shot here and I thought it was perfect, but it was wrong. And he'd say, Mike, no weather reports. Just tell me how you relate to par. Just tell me, because nobody, even the coach of the national championship team did not really care. He just needed a number. Yeah. And that's really the tournament golfer, number one, doesn't have any excuses, and they don't need to explain their round to you. They're just going to tell you what you shot because they're clinical. They know that nobody really cares. They really just want to know the number, and so they don't waste your time by walking you through every shot they hit. And the tournament golfer doesn't really live in a world of good breaks and bad breaks. As I used the example before, I hit it right down the middle and it's in a divot. All right, so what? It's in a divot. I hit it there. Mm-hmm. Nobody else hit it there for me. It's not a bad break. I don't want to be at the mercy of good breaks and bad breaks. I'm just going to feel, here's how I got to deal with hitting this ball out of the divot. The golfer who plays tournaments, however, wants to explain every shot they hit in the round, but they also want to explain all the bad breaks. They think that they, not only do they live in a world of good breaks and bad breaks, they get all the bad breaks, right? Yeah. So they've got a bag full of excuses. So the tournament golfer understands that if you can succumb to excuses, succumb to bad breaks and bad luck, that suddenly you're not really in control of what you're doing anymore. You have to wait for this good break to happen, or you have to try and avoid this bad break that might pop up at any time. So the tournament golfer doesn't have any explanations. They just give you a number. A tournament golfer doesn't have any excuses. They take responsibility for every shot they hit, no matter what the outcome is. The tournament golfer understands what they can control and what they can't control. They can't control what their opponent is doing. They can't control anything. A famous story that I talk in the book that I think is pretty amazing. Jack Nicklaus was playing in the Open, and the great Jack Nicklaus, he's on the 16th hole of the last round, and he's Phil Rogers and another player are playing behind him, and he's listening. He's trying to hear if the crowd cheers, so he knows if they made birdie. So if he knows he has either a 1-stroke or a 2-stroke lead, and he doesn't hear anything. So he plays 17 and 18 kind of aggressively, thinking he has a 2-stroke lead. Well, it turns out that both players made birdie, and he couldn't hear him because the wind was blowing the opposite direction. And he lost. He did not win the Open that year. And he said to himself, that is something I'm going to never do again. I can't control what they're doing. I just need to focus on what I'm doing. So even the greatest players in the world have become victim to trying to pay attention to what somebody else is doing, and they lose track of what they're doing. Kenny Perry, 2009, had made $37 million on tour. He was known as the greatest player to have never won a major. He comes to the Masters. His process is that he's not going to look at leaderboards at all, and he's going to be what he called patiently aggressive. He plays 3 rounds. He's on the back 9, the last round, hits it 6 inches on 16, the par 3. He still hasn't looked at a leaderboard. He's just playing his own game. He's walked off 16 green, looks up at the leaderboard, and sees that he has a 2-stroke lead. So suddenly, and the whole basis of my book is to stay in the process, not think about results, which is an idea that's been out there for a very long time, way before me. But he switched at that moment. He switched from his process, being patiently aggressive, not worrying about what everybody else is doing. And he tells his caddy, par, and we win the Masters. Well, he goes bogey, and Angel Cabrera beats him in a playoff where he makes another bogey. And he readily admits to himself that he suddenly started thinking about winning the Masters instead of just doing his process shot at a time, those old cliche things that we all know about. So even the greatest players, they can succumb to results-oriented thinking. And if you think about it, if you've got 2 players, one's a tournament golfer and one's a golfer who plays tournaments, and they both have a 10-foot putt on the last hole to win, the tournament golfer understands that you can't. Once you hit the ball, you're out of control. You have no control over that ball. So what can you do? Well, you have a pre-shot routine. You get ready to hit it. You pick your line, pick your speed, and you make the best stroke possible. And you understand ahead of time it may not go in. The golfer who plays tournaments is more result-oriented thinking. They're thinking, wow, that trophy is going to look great in my study. And my wife is going to or my mom or dad are just going to think I'm the greatest thing in the world when I make this putt, and all these extraneous things. Or they think, oh my God, what if I don't make this putt? Well, they think I'm a choker, blah, blah, blah. And all result oriented, and it just totally screws up the process. So the tournament golfer gets pulled into results oriented thinking, recognizes it, puts it away, gets back to the process.
And that was actually going to be my next question, is when you find yourself kind of going into the results oriented thoughts, how do you bring it back into the process? Like, is it just being aware and then really focusing on the next shot and the process itself? Or what do you do when you're out there and you find yourself thinking about the results more than you want to?
So it's going to happen. You can't stop it.
Yeah.
Number one, you can't get to some, nirvana where you just don't ever worry about anything. So that's just golf, and you're going to catch yourself. So the number one way that works is counting your breaths. There's nothing better in this world for a human being to relax and be able to focus on the present by counting your breaths. And so, number one, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. It lowers your blood pressure and it lowers your heartbeat. And in my book, I tell the story. I was 22 years old, and I was playing Pinehurst number 4. And back then they had the tour school where you basically, that year we started out with about 5,000 people throughout the world, had a local, regional, and then finally the national, the finals, where that was down from 5,000 starting to 144. And the first round I shot 76 and I was in 91st place, and they were taking 25 out of the 144. In fact, they had a cut, so I better make the cut. And a really interesting thing happened. A cold front blew in that night. This is in November. And the temperature dropped to about 45 degrees. But more importantly, there was a big wind, like a legit 25-mile-an-hour wind. In fact, one of the par fives at Pinehurst number 4, I hit driver wedge on the green downwind. Wow. So it was crazy windy, miserable, cold. Scott Simpson was playing in front of me, made a 12 on the 12th hole and didn't get his card. It was just brutal. Anyway, I shot 71. So now I'm in 8th place. Third round, I broke par. I'm in great shape. I'm coming down to the last round. I'm on the last hole, par 4, uphill par 4. I'm in good shape. I should qualify. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to play. Hit a really good drive right down the middle. Tugged a 5-iron into the front left bunker, but no problem. I was a good bunker player. Pin was up front. So I step into the bunker, and I remember like it was yesterday. I started thinking, of course, I'm a kid. I'm 22. I thought, I'm going to be a tour player. This is my dream come true. I can't believe this is happening to me. All this work, all I've done, I'm making it. I'm making it. I proceed to blade the bunker shot over the green into a back bunker downhill line. And everything accelerates. My heartbeat, my blood pressure, I'm sure. I immediately start visualizing my friends back in Houston saying, oh my God, Mike, you double bogeyed the last hole and missed your card by 1. It's going to be another year before you start the process again. And all these thoughts, everything accelerated. Things almost started spinning. And of course, it's still my shot because the other 2 guys are on the green and I'm in the back bunker. So I had experimented with breathing and counting my breaths. And so instinctively, I just started counting my breaths. And the way you do a breath cycle is you inhale through your nose, you hold it, and you blow it out through your mouth. And so you count them. And by the way, any of your listeners and viewers, try it. It's difficult to count up to even 3 cycles without thinking about, I wonder what I'm having for lunch today, or I wonder if these shoes need to, go with my outfit, or whatever it is. Random thoughts go through your head. So I started breathing, counting my breaths. It's my shot. I don't remember the bunker shot really at all, but I did get it up and down. And I did get my card. Now at that time, I was the youngest player on the PGA Tour and all that. But the surefire way to get back to the present and get away from result-oriented thinking is to experiment and work and practice at counting breaths. No doubt about it.
And even this past weekend was the Open up at Livermore Liverpool, excuse me. I lived in Livermore, California, so that's why I said that. Anyway, with Brian Harmon, and he's coming down 18 and he hits his approach into the bunker and he still is very serious. You can tell he's very focused still. He hits that bunker shot, which did not look like an easy bunker shot to me whatsoever, but he hits a great shot and you could see him completely relax after that. Like he knew he had to keep his focus through that shot until getting it on the green. And he had a 5-shot lead or 4-shot lead, whatever it was. Oh, okay. So let's get into, we kind of touched on 3 things you can control. How about, let's go back to that scar tissue that we touched on earlier. You would talk about locational scar tissue and situational scar tissue. Can you dive into those 2 topics for us? Because again, another thing that I think a lot of listeners can get a lot out of. Locational
scar tissue is, I relate to being like, at a golf course where you've got this hole, it's just got your number. My course, I played north of Houston. Our 15th hole was this beast of a par 4, tight driving, OB right, water all down the left side. Water came in front of the green, long hole, probably 440, 450 from the back tees. And so your round really wasn't over until you got past number 15. And so that was a hole that you had to figure out a strategy for it. If I've got a great round going, do I back off and just take a bogey if I have to prevent a double bogey? And so that is a situation where most of us have a golf course where there's a hole or 2 that just have our number. And so that's scar tissue. And you find yourself, whether you got a good round going or not, you're thinking about that hole. And if it's on, if it's the first hole, good for you. It's over. Get it over with quick. But if it's on the back 9 somewhere, if you find yourself thinking about that hole because you've had so many disasters, it's been a tripwire to, blowing up your whole round. What I suggest in there is to find a different way to play that hole, much like I was suggesting to you about desert highlands, find a different way to play the course so that you can make it work for you and your individual thing. So it might be hitting a different club off the tee and then deciding whether or not you want to go for the green over the water or not, whatever skill level you're at. To find a different way to play that hole. There was another hole that famously had my number north of Houston here, and there was an annual tournament there. It was a double dog leg par 5, and most people laid up off the tee, and then most people hit driver off tee, and then they would hit some kind of iron in play. Well, I had to start playing it differently because I kept making 7s on it. I kept worried about that hole. It was the 11th hole. And so what I started doing was hit a 3-wood off the tee and then be aggressive on the second shot to be able. That's where I wanted to take. If I had to take a chance, that's where I was going to take a chance. Just find a different way to play the hole. Now, situational is one that we're all familiar with as well. Situational doesn't have anything to do with a particular hole that's got your number. It's a situation that's got your number where we typically have been in contention, let's say, whether, again, it's playing against this guy who's always knocking you out of your $5, or whether you're playing in the U.S. Amateur, your situation is that, hey, I've been here before, and I really blew it, and I keep blowing it, and so which is choking really, and that's all that really is thinking about when you're in situational scar tissue that gets built up because you've underperformed under pressure. You've got to find a way. Breathing, as we just talked about, is a great way to do that. But the other thing is to recognize that you're in this situation where you've got to execute, and all you have to do is get yourself in mindset of pre-shot routine and something that's familiar to you, and then work in your process. Once you find yourself thinking about, oh gosh, I hope I don't hit it in the water again and lose this bet or lose this tournament, you're thinking about results, and you become a victim to that, and you can't really focus on your process. So it's the same old thing. Catch yourself thinking about results, start counting your breaths to get you back to the present. I dedicated a whole chapter to the pre-shot routine, and I think the pre-shot routine is very important because that's your familiarity. That's your shelter in the storm. When you're really feeling the heat and you're starting to count your breaths, and now it's your turn to hit the shot, and you've got to execute. You got to stand and deliver. You want to have something that's familiar. It's almost like someone holding your hand and saying, "You got this." That's what a pre-shot routine is. And so you want to practice your pre-shot routine. And Nick Faldo famously timed his pre-shot routine. Wouldn't even go out on a golf course. They'd get he and Fanny Sunderson, his caddy, she would have the stopwatch and hit the stopwatch, and he would take the club out. He would look at a shot, and they would time that so that when they were actually under the gun, she could know that, hey, you're going too quick, or hey, you're going too slow. Let's start this all over again. Yeah. And so the pre-shot routine and breathing are two wonderful ways. So get out of the results-oriented thinking for situational scar tissue. And when you've got locational scar tissue, figure out a different way to play the hole. I don't care what you have to hit off the tee. Do something different, because that scar tissue is going to keep building and building on that hole until you figure out a better way to play it.
Yeah. And even when you think of the holes that you do play really well, like I'm just thinking of hole number 1 at Arizona Country Club, my home course. Like I have the same target every time. I use a driver every time, and I know what the layup is. Like I have a plan that works on that hole. So why would I change it at any point? So it's almost like looking at the opposite effect of holes that you do play really well. You have a plan that works. And if you have a hole that you're struggling with, or you have that scar tissue, you just have to find your way of playing that hole well. If we still have a golfer that's listening at this point that's relatively new, I'm hoping that because I do have some golfers that listen to the podcast that are more like they just started a year or two ago. Hopefully they're still listening, because a lot of these concepts are for all levels. And again, you put it in play for whatever you're competing at right now, whether it's just a league day or whatever. One of the chapters you have where you talk about playing with players that are better than you. And that's so important. And a lot of beginners will hear that too, or any level golfer, you'll hear, start playing with players that are better than you. Surround yourself with golfers that are better than you. What other 2 things that kind of go along the line of that do you think would give you a competitive edge? Because to me, surrounding myself with golfers that are better than me and playing with them on a regular basis will give me a competitive edge. I really believe that. So what other 2 things can you say that might really give someone the competitive edge on playing in a tournament?
That's a great question. So the first thing is, like you just said, playing with players that are better than you. The interesting thing about playing with players that are better than you, then as expected, you're going to see what they do better than you. They score better than you, and they maybe handle situations differently. And so that's a great way to copy and learn from. But also, you will probably find that there are some things you do just as well as that better player. And you can learn that, hey, maybe I can do that as well as they can. Maybe I can, be as good as they are one day too. So I think that observing what they do better than you and also observing those things you do that are pretty close to what they're doing to encourage you to play. The other thing in terms of being competitive, even for brand new golfers, I've got a good friend of mine in West Palm Beach who was the first person who actually read my book. He read the manuscript and he said, Mike, this means I can't complain anymore. I can't really whine anymore about, things that happen to me on the golf course. And I said, that's right. If you're going to be a tournament golfer, if you just want to be a chump and be a golfer who plays tournaments, that's fine. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep whining and complaining. But that was his big thing is he jokingly said that, gosh, I can't whine anymore. So I think it just goes back to, I told these junior golfers on Sunday night when I spoke at their dinner, I said, you can leave here tonight being a tournament golfer. It's a decision. There's no barrier to entry. But you can't just do one of these things that I outline in the book. If you're going to be a tournament golfer, you got to do them all. And I use the example of these 2 people that were smokers, and they both wanted to quit smoking. They both went to a party. The first one got offered a cigarette, and he said, no, I'm trying to quit. But the second one got offered a cigarette, and he said, no, I don't smoke. So he had already began to be a non-smoker. And I told all these, and I'll tell all your listeners, you can choose right now to be a tournament golfer and not be a victim anymore. Embrace the suck. Understand what you can control, what you can't control. Don't use excuses. Don't believe in bad breaks. Stay in the present. And to help yourself stay in the present, practice counting your breaths. All these great things you can do for yourself at any level of golfer. Oh, by the way, doesn't even have to be on the golf course. When I had back surgery that was 3 years ago next month. I was in incredible pain. I couldn't walk. I couldn't sit. I couldn't eat. I lost 35 pounds, all these bad things. But what really got me through that was that I was a tournament golfer, because when the pain wave would come, I would immediately start counting my breaths and just sort of take me away from this pain. And it brought me right there to the present. And I wasn't worried about, what was going to happen. I was just focused on counting those breaths. So all these things you can do to be a tournament golfer in your personal relationships and your business relationships, and of course, on the golf course at any level that you play, are going to make you much more resilient and going to really accelerate your progress in your golf at whatever level you're at.
And to kind of wrap it up in a bow, I have to remind the listeners too that every different level tournament that you start playing, you will meet more people and your community will grow, and you will meet these fabulous lifelong friends along the way. And again, you never would have met them if you didn't put yourself out there right in the beginning. Every level is a whole new group of people, and you get to meet them and you get to learn from them. And it's just quite a wonderful community. And I'm sure, Mike, some of your closest friends are from on the golf course that you met on the golf course, I would imagine.
My group of tournament golfers that I play golf with, we've all been through this. When you've been through an experience, a shipwreck, and you survive with, you've been through this terrible thing together. You all understand what you choose to put yourself through to play tournament golf. It is a brotherhood and a sisterhood of people that, if you're not a tournament golfer, you're not inside the group, you really don't understand what it is. But when you do understand what it is, any experience you go through together, you obviously have this bond that's unbreakable.
They will understand for sure. Oh, well, again, Mike's book is called The Tournament Golfer's Playbook. Where's the best place that they can grab a copy, Mike?
So, Tori, it's I think the best way is to go to my webpage, which is TG, like tournament golfer, tgplaybook.com. There's a button you can, but my favorite button, it says buy now. It's a great button.
One of my favorite buttons too.
But it's also got a lot of this podcast when it comes out will be on there. And it's got a lot of background material. It's got a way to email me easily. If you have any questions, you get the book and you have questions like Tori and I are talking about today, email me and I'll email you back with my answer. Very much want to stay in touch with all your listeners and viewers.
Perfect. And that also is in the show notes if you just want to go to the show notes and click there. Mike, thanks for being on today. Thank you for sharing your passion about tournament golf. It's a whole nother world, like you explained at the beginning of the show. And while it can be tough, it's really an amazing part of this golf journey that we're all on too. So I encourage everyone to go sign up for a tournament today. Just do it. Just do it. Put yourself out there. See what you can learn. Go meet the people. And what's the worst that could happen? You're in DFL. Guess what? I've been in DFL. Mike, have you been in DFL before? Do you know what that means, Mike? DFL?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
DFL.
Dead last. We're coming dead last. We're close to it. We won't say what the F stands for, but come on. Have you ever come in last?
I think everybody picks up on it.
And have you survived? Have you survived coming in last?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to just pick yourself up, and that's why if you're a tournament golfer, you're gonna find a way to succeed in anything you do, and you're gonna be okay with it when things don't work out so well because you're your own best friend, and that's the key. And thanks, Tori, for having me on the show. Thanks so much for what you're doing for golf and getting all these great ideas out there to your fans.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.